Anthony Albanese has done it again. The man from Camperdown, the son of a single mum, the humble Sydneysider who once served spaghetti at his own campaign barbecues, has defeated the man who always looks like he's about to confiscate your iPad, Peter Dutton. It's official. Anthony Albanese has secured another term as Prime Minister of Australia. Against a backdrop of global uncertainty, domestic frustration, and a political opponent who could frown through concrete, Albanese convinced Australians to give him another go. And in classic Aussie style, it wasn't a dry political affair, it was a wild mix of sausage sizzles, swinging seats, and more democracy sausages than you could poke a polling booth at. So how did we get here? Let's start with the man himself. Anthony Albanese, Albo to most, is not your average PM. He didn't grow up with a silver spoon, a media empire, or even a backyard pool. He grew up in public housing in Sydney's inner west, raised by a fiercely determined single mother, Marianne, who lived with chronic illness and still managed to raise a future leader with resilience thicker than Vegemite on toast. His story is so Aussie it might as well be printed on the back of a Weet-Bix box. As a young lad, Albanese thought his father had died in a car accident. It wasn't until he was an adult that he discovered the truth. His father was alive, living in Italy. That's right, Albanese's life had more twists than a Neighbours season finale. But instead of letting his background define him, he used it as fuel. He became the first person in his family to finish high school, then went on to university, became a political staffer, and eventually entered Parliament. What really separates Albanese is his authenticity. The bloke still goes to Rabbitohs games in a hoodie. He still DJs at community events. And he has this remarkable ability to sound like he's having a yarn over a beer, even when he's announcing billion-dollar infrastructure projects. Now, the 2025 election was no walk in the park. Peter Dutton came in swinging like an angry magpie in spring. His campaign was tight, his messaging sharper than a meat pie crust at a servo, and he banked on fear, control, and promises of strength. Dutton's strategy was clear. Paint Albanese as too soft, too slow, too distracted by international issues. He ran ads that made it seem like if you voted Labour, your local pub would be turned into a tofu museum. But Australians weren't buying it. Because when it came down to it, Albanese offered something Dutton didn't. Hope. Albanese's vision for Australia's next chapter was as ambitious as it was grounded. He promised to double down on housing affordability, not just with band-aids but with bricks and mortar. He spoke of major green energy transitions, clean manufacturing hubs, and turning Australia into a renewable energy superpower. In a move that made coal executives spill their coffees, he doubled investment into solar, wind, and green hydrogen, with plans to export clean energy and jobs, not just minerals. He also vowed to expand Medicare, strengthen aged care, and keep wages moving upward. No more trickle down, he said, we'll do a bit of proper pouring instead. It's like he rebranded economic reform as pouring beers. Finally, an economic metaphor Aussies can understand. And there were some funny moments along the way. Like when Albo accidentally wandered into the wrong campaign office in Brisbane and shook hands with a cardboard cutout of Scott Morrison. Or when he challenged a group of trot-eyes to a sausage sizzle cook-off and nearly set fire to the onions. Crispy, he said, just how Mum used to make them. Or when he visited a childcare center and ended up in a full-blown glitter fight with a bunch of 4-year-olds. The glitter remained in his hair for 3 straight press conferences. It's festive, he said. We're building a better future, and apparently some of it sparkles. Still, Albanese was no clown. Behind the humor was strategy, and behind the speeches was substance. His government's record on infrastructure was solid. They delivered major rail projects, upgraded roads, and finally finished some of those infamous half-built overpasses that had become local memes. He backed innovation and industry, especially in regional areas, turning towns that had once been written off into tech and agri-powerhouses. Education was another front where he doubled down. Not just on university places but on TAFE, apprenticeships, and rural access. Albanese's message was clear. You shouldn't have to move to a capital city just to get a proper education. The future of Australia, he said, is everywhere, not just within a 10 kilometers radius of Parliament House. On foreign policy, he managed to walk the tightrope between diplomacy and dignity. He strengthened ties with allies, kept relations smooth with China, and made Australia a louder voice in climate and human rights conversations. His approach was calm, consistent, And unlike his opponent, not based on memes or fearmongering. Now let's talk about the voters. They turned up in droves. Young people, many of whom were voting for only the second or third time, showed up with skateboards, coffees, and fierce opinions. Seniors came with sun hats and folding chairs. Families arrived with kids in tow and dogs on leads. It was a full-blown democratic festival, complete with sausage sizzles and passionate arguments over who makes the best potato salad. And when the results came in, it was clear. Australia wanted more of Albo. It wasn't a landslide, but it was convincing. Dutton, despite his stronghold in Queensland and parts of suburban Perth, couldn't bridge the gap. His message, though powerful in tone, lacked warmth, vision, and that all-important larrikin touch. Albanese, on the other hand, rode a wave of optimism, relatability, and progressive policy. The bloke who once said he was driven by the values of fairness and opportunity had earned the people's trust again. So what does the future hold? Albanese says he's just getting started. His next term will focus on building a national affordable housing register and unlocking federal land for development. Introducing climate-smart cities with clean public transport and green infrastructure. Creating a universal childcare system, giving families both flexibility and financial relief. Strengthening Indigenous voices in Parliament, even in the wake of the failed voice referendum, by pursuing meaningful treaty and truth-telling processes. Protecting Australia's natural wonders with a new federal conservation body that even includes citizen scientists and traditional owners. Tackling corporate loopholes to ensure multinational companies pay their fair share. If you're selling billions in Australia, he said, you can chip in for the roads your trucks drive on. There's even talk of expanding voting access to younger Australians and embracing digital democracy tools. And in his most unexpected move yet, he's pushing for a national DJ day. Because every politician, he joked, needs to know when to drop the bass. It's clear that Albanese doesn't just want to be Prime Minister, he wants to reshape the role. Less lecture, more listening. Less spin, more sausages. Less politics, more policy. Australians responded to that message. In a time of cynicism and fatigue, they chose a leader who isn't perfect, but who shows up, listens, adapts, and doesn't mind getting a little glitter in his hair. Anthony Albanese, against the odds in the polls, secured a second term, not because he played the political game better, but because he played it differently. And for now, the great Aussie experiment continues.